Okay, I started trying to come up with a visual of the dynamics of the mechanics of force. The dynamics of the mechanics of force. And we're going to see it being displayed in two relatives to itself, one being excessive and the other just simply being force. And then we'll see it being broken down into either a repelling or an attraction, and which of the two those are. And to help you kind of understand, or even maybe what you should understand, is that I just simply just started scribbling all this down. I'm going to redraw it and expand the ideas that have expanded as I began to do this process. And you wouldn't believe what's come about. And some of you might be able to find the E equals MC square in here. And then really, you'll just have to wait until it all unfolds. But it's going to give you a scientific, mathematical relativity that's not based on the dry thought of pure mechanics. It's going to be watered with the spiritual sight that goes beyond the purely mechanistic dynamo of their approach to progress, reality, unity, and brotherhood. We will supersede that. And I think that the gift of the Spirit that it gives to the people is a way to take the very broadened ideas of their misconceptions that have developed into the educational input that they've given us. And Jesus Christ can narrow all that down and, in a sense, funnel it all down into one precept of understanding that can be held and contained within your mind all at once. You know? Rather than it's so detached and fragmented and disjointed from the relative connectedness of the meanings, the propulsion of the energies in which propelled them from the places they came, the input, the output, the equation is able to be maintained. And you have some sort of sense of it all simultaneously as it's happening, in which most people, if not all, currently on this world are unable to do. Maybe just a few are able. So I'm going to do a little bit of explaining now. And you know what? I made a comment on Eric Covenant of Love's page the other day. And this just happened to come out, and it was something that I was motivated. Spirit, likes to speak to people in hyper-relative terms to certain of their chief variable goals, their observable goals, the things that they look at and the things that they have created as their objective through that observation. But what we know is that that observation is skewed. And that's what this Gnosticism has done to these people, which has created the need for a dualistic good and evil within the singularity of the individual, when in all actuality the singularity of the individual is good in its entirety. Only does the opposition of evil appear when you are in resistance to a progressive future. And that's what we'll see here. But I don't know what you're going to get from this, but what I wrote to Eric yesterday or the day before is what really explains this in its entirety. And this connection down here with the sand don't make any early judgments on what you see, and I will come in close before this video is over and kind of give you a view to read and look at this to kind of see the order of this mechanics of force that's taken place, and then get you to maybe ponder the inverse of action, and then of course to ponder the questions that I've proposed in the description box. And it starts with a statement: you cannot attract the past, but you can repel the future. Bullman. And I've decided to call this individual Bullman based upon the force and this excessive force principle of men that they've had to develop to get what they believe they want, and which I told you is the exact opposite of what you're to do. This creates more energy that has to be expended, in essence the excessive force, a greater level of consumption of the products on this world in which we see have begun to deplete it. Now those will have hyperrelatives between physical, spiritual, and even mental qualities as well. But this M represents man with the horns bent down, pushing off of this progressive future and rejection of it, more or less pushing the energy back towards the past. And this E represents Earth. So we have the E for Earth, energy. We have the M for man. We have the C down here, which stands for the conditional environment, of which we are to attune with in harmony. In essence, not to repel it, but instead to attract its positives to create a relative smoothness and refinement of the reality around us. So the C is a derivative from the PC, which I've already explained to you guys as the predeterminate condition, which, as we see, is relative in the minds of men to this day. It represents the condition of the people, in which the people themselves are born into a predeterminate of that state, which has been caused by this action which these individuals are seeking to blame. And then now the people are seen as no more than just a product of the conditional environment, without the foreknowledge of these individuals taking the owning up to the creation of the very conditional environment of which they now detest by their own actions. So the C now represents the conditional environment as they see the world around them, minus the people, minus the personality, and then minus the compassion of these people, now just basically seeing it as inanimate matter in which they seek to manipulate for their forward progress, which is in rejection to the forward progress of the future. And we can use a simple clock to show you that understanding. And then the clock itself, as the hand turns, in all actuality this way, will show you how they see the dualism going simultaneously in both ways, but I can show you that it's going the same way the entire time, just like the direction of the grain. Now you would see the Bullman pushing the Earth into the past, and this is where you get the opposition that now they entertain as the dualism, which would be the gnosis. And we're going to see this take place within the people, and then we see this take place within the construct, that now the people become a product of the construct, and then there's where the inverse of the action takes place, in which these individuals here have completely become oblivious to. So opposition is not dualistic by their definition, and that would be a component of good and evil. It's only by default of their perception. And when I show you better this action of excessive force to propel the energy of the progress of the future into the past for what it believes is the progress of the future, then you understand the total failure of Gnosticism. And then the inverse of action will kick in which this will create a resistance discharged. The resistance now represents the people that are now rebelling against the excessive force. But if they rebel against the excessive force in the correct direction, in which is going towards the progress of love, brotherhood, and compassion, this inverse of this action of pushing against the people actually makes It actually makes the people better. As I said, that's why Jesus Christ always continually was able to minister much more successfully to the poor and the needy, those that have been oppressed, because they are much more readily and easily attracted to a different form of force that is based upon compassion, love, and mercy, even for themselves. So the resistance that the bullman has created within the people that he rejects is now creating a discharge of the action, which has now become an inverse of his original intent, which is now creating a progressive, heightened, hyper genetic attunement by the people that he is already discounted and sought to hold down. So in other words, by forcing this energy towards the future, at the same time, he thinks he is seeking to bring this into the past, into the later, get rid of them. And then this is why you see the arrows go in both directions. I didn't have enough space here to put these in the right perspective. But what I'm trying to tell you is that these two faces represent these two circles, and they represent them as the predeterminate condition of the people. And then, of course, they represent now the resultant duality of good and evil. That now, by his action against these people, his hope is to create the destruction and the division and the conquer thereof. And then I'm going to show you this connection with the X and the hex, with the lightning bolts in a better manner, which will tell you that he's denying the spiritual and even the material truths to both sides. And this would go to the sophistry of the highest spirit deceiver of these factions of men on earth. But then, as I said, the inverse of the action creates an upgrade of the genetics. Due to the force opposition that's applied, now the people that are oppressed genetically adapt much more faster due to the misconception of this individual to try to keep them down. In all actuality, he has propelled them progressively into a future that he thinks he's bringing them into this direction. But in all actuality, it's bringing he himself into that direction. And that's the inverse of actions. I'll be able to show you the inverse of actions in a visual form that you will be able to understand, as I will show you the energy mechanics that can be traced out mechanically, mathematically, in this diagram here, as I talk further when I come back. But I want you to imagine a ring. Of course, we've been talking about a ring for so long. I'd like you to imagine suspending pantyhose over the ring. The threshold of the ring, which would represent the precarious of the past and the future. As I said, the threshold, one going into the later regression of, and then one going to the progression, the potential of. And then if we were to stretch out the pantyhose and pull it towards the progressive future, a funnel would result. And then if we were to pull the pantyhose in this direction, more or less pushing it, as you see, a funnel develops. And this is where we're going to get the relativity for the movie Flushed Away, in which you know is all about, in essence, this dynamics of the funnel, creating an energy force pool that is, in essence, a relative form of attraction that in all actuality is not the correct attraction. It's an attraction of deception through the manipulation of force to create the disassociation of the excessive force so that people don't recognize that's what's happening to them. In other words, they're being flushed away. And it can be explained here. So the future would be traveling this direction, and we can show you this with the hands of a clock, and then we can show you where they've been confused, where the hands of the clock simultaneously be looking like they're going both ways. Now, if you imagine the individual here, he has a singularity of purpose, an origination of this purpose. But as we see, this purpose is divergent based upon his Gnostic philosophy. So in other words, he incurs the double. The double by his divergency creates one being evil and one being good. So let me put this in perspective before I close the video here. And then we'll come back. I want you to ponder all of this. If we were to get rid of all of the words here, okay, and then let's just say that we've got an individual that is in essence being held or contained within something. And then we will call this E now, just in simple form, a type of stone. And that this man has taken it upon himself to push the stone, remove the stone off of something, in essence, to let something out. As we know, it's in representation of the Golden Age, and now it's in representation of those that they have made a connection with that are sealed within the physicality of this moon location, in which now is even in a reflective relativity to those that are sealed in spirit underneath the Giza complex at the 30th parallel. But this individual here now has entertained a divergent nature, in which he believes that evil must be done to create the progresses of the good, in which that's completely inaccurate. Because if we were to just take his entire nature, which has now become bipolar, but the bipolarism as he sees it is one is a repelling and the other is attraction, just like you have in a magnet, just like you have in a single sphere. But as we see, the polarity is connected in a singular rod. The singularity of the rod represents the ultimate goodness of the unification of the purpose of these two. In his mind is now supposed divergent energies, but the energies are not divergent. Let's take the scale down onto a more physical estate, and then now imagine a man and a woman. They come together to create a progression known as a physical life, in which God breathes into it to create the spiritual life, and at the same time give it the consciousness with the free will. So I ask you, which one is evil in this instance to create the progresses of the future, of which are the children, the man or the woman? The answer is neither, in which that is why Gnosticism, the gnosis, and even the alchemical gnosis of the people is a total failure, based upon these bull-headed men forcing everybody into the regression of the past, but under the perception it's the benefit of the supposed future that they lost. And all of this can be explained, if we have any high physicists watching, if we have anybody from MIT or whatever these great schools are that these people quote, Oxford University. I don't even know the names of these colleges. I'm not a college scholar. I'm a university scholar of the universe Father and all of his truth that I can receive. You know? So you cannot attract the past, but you can repel the future with this excessive force. And then that's what we're going to see is taking place. So keep in mind, don't become confused here. In this situation, this is his perception of what he seeks to do to the people. But in all reality, as I said, as he forces them into the direction of the future progress that he himself rejects, because the people are now rejecting the excessive force, which is not loving, it's not caring, it's not neighborly, it's not brotherly. So by nature, as Jesus Christ already understood, the poor and the oppressed would gravitate much more readily to him, and that's why we get a genetic upgrade. And then the upkick and the acceleration of the genetic potential in the poor and the outcast and the undesirables, those of the racial stigmatite, those of the blood doctrines, now become enhanced by his unwitting failure to understand the true dynamics of force. Now, as I said, this creates the divergency by his own, because he does not incur the progresses of the future propulsion, in which he's now supplying the energy unwittingly to these people that he considers undesirable into the future progresses of the future. And then now they only experiences the future progress of the future, in which I'm the resultant witness of that. And then now, as you can see by his own divergencies, he only experiences the faulty precepts of the past. And you can't attract the past, my friend. I'll be back.